Well, welcome friends to another episode of DEKB7Q8C. Myself, I am Richard Clark, and this is a continuation on the discussion of batteries, power supplies, and power connectors in the various formats that I was going to give you links, well not links, but choices, yes, and here we are to show them off. Right off is the battery. The battery, this is a lead acid gel cell battery. It's sealed, has two connections at the top. This is something that you might start with. I think this is a 28 amp hour battery, but there are other sizes, and this I believe is about $70–80. So that's what it looks like. It's fairly robust. I've used them, and they're rock solid. Last a long time. That's what they're built for. Now, to charge them, or as an alternative to the battery, either or, we move on to the power supply. Now, this power supply is, as I've suggested in the past, this is a switcher. In other words, it doesn't have an iron core transformer in it to step the voltage down to, in this case, 15 volts at 30 amps. The marking on the case would suggest otherwise. It looks like it's a 24 volt source. But either way, it has its same form factor. This is about the size of a thick pocket book, about 400 pages or so. If you look down on the right face with all the connections, at the left there's a little adjustment for setting the voltage output, and this is a significant point in that this is not strictly a 15 volt supply. This is adjustable between 13.5 and 16.5 volts, roughly in that range. The range itself is not specified. In other words, they don't hold to it. It's just an indication of how much range that you might have. Plus or minus 1 volt, plus or minus 2 volts. It's about a 10% variation. However, moving to the right of that little window at the bottom, we have, if you can see the inscriptions on the side, it says DC output, plus V, minus V, ground, N, and L. That's the labels across the top of this terminal block. And you'll notice that each plus V and minus V has 3 terminals dedicated to it. And in this sense, it's, well, that's simply because of the power, or the current capacity needs to be spread amongst all these connectors, so say 10 amps each. But if I'm not mistaken, one of those connections, each for each lead, there's 3 terminals for the plus V and 3 terminals for the minus V. That at least one terminal in each group of 3 is what's called the sense lead. And the sense lead is the feedback to the power supply to know what the voltage it is delivering to the load. And it would presume that the load is right at this terminal block. However, with a sense lead, you can use that, if I'm correct, I haven't seen the schematic on this, but it's typical. If that lead was connected remotely to the actual load, that is separate from the two remaining leads that go to power the load, this sense lead on the load, that remote load, not the load at this terminal block, but some distance away, you connect that sense lead there, and this power supply will guarantee that it will deliver the voltage that you set at that load and hold it. So This means that if you have any voltage loss through this connector block or through your leads to that remote load, this will adjust to that loss and still deliver within its capacity the voltage that you set. So this is one way of reducing line loss. Well, you still have the line loss, but in this case it's compensated for at the load so that the load sees its rated power. So, moving on from the battery and the power supply, I'm going to get into the connectors, and here I start with the Anderson Power. It's I use these connectors. These are standard forklift power pack connectors, and they come in a variety of sizes. I won't show those sizes here, but they're staged such that some of them are as big as your hand, some of them are as small as an eraser. And then there's a series that's smaller yet, and that I'm separating these two. But this one is for, say, your connector to your power or your battery. So this would be the battery connector, and it will mate to just exactly the same standard housing. These are parallel faced connections, and going to the pin that's inside, you can see how robust that they are. This is the face of the contact. This is the well for holding the lead, the wire that goes to the battery or your power supply. You should get both battery and power supply, and connector them with this Power Pulse 75 Series 50, SB50 over here. Now you're gonna, let's return to the these connectors. They sort of bump into each other and ride over and have a pressure that presents a good uniform mating surface, self-cleaning as far as the wiping condition goes, and certainly robust. Lots of meat in these connectors. However, you might want to think of what's called fan out. The big connector going to the battery, that's one. The connector that's going into it should fan out into separate leads for your equipment or to a power block or a distribution block. I'll talk about that later in future episode, where you integrate all of your high power connections into basically a plate that's been drilled with connectors, so that you have principally ground, one solid piece of ground. I've done this in the windows back, well, window over here. A tall bar that when the window closes, it closes onto the bar. I have pass-throughs, SO239s. Did I say that right? 238s. So that I can pass an antenna at both ends through the window into it, and it's mounted in a solid bar of aluminum. How you get these scraps of aluminum is up to you. I've been lucky here in Seattle with Boeing surplus in the past, but that's another story. Returning to my display here. So you can see that this is a big meaty contact, and it's not specifically necessary for many of your applications. It might be to your transmitter if it's 100-watt capable, but other accessories would use something in Anderson's power pole connector series. And here you can see the range of sizes and the size of the connector right here. We're going to see that again. Or the connector over here for this size. So these vary. This one I think is capable of certainly 30 amps, if not 50. And varying down to probably about 5 amps there, maybe 2. So we have, as you can see, features flat wiping contacts, interchangeable genderless design. In other words, this socket can plug into a copy of itself, just as this green one can plug into. The greens can connect into the greens, the reds can connect into reds. That's what they mean by genderless, is that they're not keyed as male and female socket and plug. They're just contacts. Here we can see it's a shell for the Power Pole 75. That one is, if we look in the series, it's the second of the series there. It comes in various colors, as you saw earlier. Here we can see typical prices, several bucks. They're worth it, believe me. If you start a hobby, this is the place to build up from. And that's one of the connectors for this power pole. As you can see, this conforms to a rather more standard kind of crimp style connection. I've always crimped and soldered. So let's see, is that the end of it? Have we come to the... Yep, we're back to the battery. So there you have it. The source, Anderson, the batteries. Oh, I forgot to give the source for the... well, let's see. Well, I have to do a little research here. Jameco, yeah. Go to Jameco for the power supply. And scout around for your best prices, but don't scrimp. So that's about as much as I think I need to say to fill in my commitments to you on connectors, batteries, and power supplies that are reasonably priced and suitably robust for a healthy future in your maker space, your maker activities, ham radio, shortwave listening. It's, if you're a dedicated shortwave listener, yes, it's something you might want when the lights go out. So all of this is pretty standard stuff. It's robust. I encourage you to follow my lead, and I'll close it here and extend my 73s to all. See you in the next episode.